Hey everyone, so this is an updated video on how to proxy APIs in the Anypoint platform. In the past, I've made some videos that showed how to proxy a SOAP API and how to proxy a REST. This one is kind of a consolidated view showing some of the new features within 2019. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is sign into the Anypoint platform. And from the Anypoint platform, we're going to go ahead and switch to Exchange. So for the purposes of today's demonstration, we're going to be using a SOAP API to proxy, and this one is a calculator SOAP API that allows you to do addition, subtraction, deletion. So we'll go ahead and copy this WSDL, and coming over to Exchange, let's go ahead and add a new asset. So we'll go ahead and call this a calculator SOAP API. And for the asset type, since we're going to be adding a WSDL, we'll go ahead and select WSDL, and instead of uploading a WSDL file, we'll go ahead and paste in the URL for that SOAP API. We'll click on publish, and then that's going to go ahead and add this specific asset to the Exchange. So just quick kind of refresh of the Exchange. The Exchange is sort of your Apple App Store of APIs, connectors, and templates. There is a Exchange that's provided by MuleSoft that has all our different APIs, connectors, and templates. And then as you start building out new assets, have your own APIs, that's where you can publish them to your own private exchange for consumption by your partners, by your customers, by your internal users. Okay. So here is that calculator SOAP API. In here, you can add additional information around this WSDL, what it provides. You can click on View WSDL to kind of see the actual WSDL itself. You can have different versions of it, but this is where you can kind of keep track of all your different APIs across your organization. Okay. So now let's go ahead and switch over to the API manager, and we're going to go ahead and set up a proxy now over that specific SOAP endpoint. So once we switch over to the API manager, we can click on Manage API. Instead of adding it directly to the Exchange, you also have the ability of creating that API directly from the API manager, but I wanted to kind of go through the flow of adding that from Exchange first. Okay, so let's go ahead now and click on Manage API from Exchange. And in the API name, let's go ahead and search for Calc, and that'll bring up the API that we just added to Exchange. It'll go ahead and auto-populate the asset type, the version, and the asset version. For the managing type, we're going to go ahead and deploy this with a proxy, and that proxy is going to sit in Cloud Hub. You also have the option of using Hybrid or Runtime Fabric. And for the Mule version, let's go ahead and check the box to say that we're going to use Mule 4 to be the proxy. For the implementation URI, let's go ahead and paste in the WSDL endpoint, and then for the path, we'll leave that as is. For the service name, port, and namespace, we can get that from the WSDL. So toward the bottom of the WSDL, generally, there is the service name, the service port. So we'll go and copy and paste those in here. The port is calculator SOAP. And then for the namespace, that's toward the top in the target namespace attribute. So let's go ahead and copy that and paste that here into the namespace. And then for the advanced options, you can see that it's currently set up to be an HTTP endpoint. I'm going to have a follow-up video that kind of shows you how to leverage the new secrets manager and deploy this as an HTTPS endpoint later on. But for now, let's go ahead and keep it as HTTP, and we'll click on Save. And once that's added, it'll go ahead and bring you to that new page for the calculator SOAP API. And then down below, we're going to go ahead and select the runtime version for the proxy, and then also give it a name. So we'll say that this is a calculator SOAP proxy. And let's go ahead and click on deploy. So we'll give it a couple seconds here. It's going to go ahead and deploy the proxy. It's going to start the application, and then it'll let us know once that deployment is successful. Okay, so the deployment's done. You can see it, the deploy was successful. Let's go ahead and close this window now. And in here in the API management page for this proxy endpoint, there is now a proxy URL. So we can go ahead and right click on this and open this up in a new tab. And in here, let's go ahead and just add WSDL to the end of this. And you can see that here is that proxied endpoint now that's being controlled by API Manager. So let's go ahead and test this out, right? We'll go ahead and jump into SOAP UI. we'll create a new project and call this calc, and we'll paste in that proxy endpoint, and we'll click on OK. And once we add that in here, it's going to pull back an understanding of the different operations that are available. Let's just go ahead and test out the add operation. So we'll test out the add operation with a request, and we'll pass it some values in here. So we'll say 232 plus 4. And once we click on play, it's going to go ahead and pass that information and give us the result back. So this endpoint is now controlled by the API manager. Instead of users going directly to that underlying SOAP endpoint, they're going to go through the proxied endpoint that's being managed by Mule. So back in the API manager, what we can do is apply policies now. So we can apply a new policy to this endpoint. Let's just go ahead and apply a simple rate limiting policy. We'll choose the latest and greatest one, and we'll configure this one to only allow 3 requests within a 1-minute time window. This can be applied, across a cluster. You can expose headers, but let's go ahead and apply this across this API. And generally, it takes a couple, seconds for this to be applied. Within the API management for this specific API, we can go ahead and click on the Manage Cloud Hub Proxy and see the proxy that's deployed within Runtime Manager, right? So in here, we can go ahead and change the worker size, we can change the runtime version, we can change the region that it's deployed to. Additionally, we can also look at the logs for this runtime. So coming in here, we can see if the policy was applied yet. It doesn't look like it has been yet, but what we can do is come back over to the tab, and we can hit refresh a couple times to see if that policy is being violated. Okay, so you can see now that the policy has been applied. Once we make too many requests, it's going to go ahead and give us an error message saying that the quota has been exceeded. Coming back over to the Runtime Manager, you can see here it says the policy was applied to the specific application. And then if we try to test this again from SOAP UI, let's go ahead and run a request here a couple times. We can go ahead and see that we're going to get the same exact error message saying that too many requests have been made against this API. So hopefully this was a good overview of setting up a proxy within the Anypoint platform for a SOAP API. The process would be the same for REST API, of course, minus some of the configurations that are needed for a SOAP endpoint. But hopefully this gives you a good overview. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave any comments or questions. I'm always happy to help.